Okay, we will go ahead and get started. I'm hoping people are able to see my screen, although I can't tell. If you can't, leave a Q&A, or Deborah, maybe you tell me if I'm not. Um, Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your applications and your willingness to support the City of Monroe's tourism efforts. Really enjoyed reading through everybody's applications, and I'm excited to see what will come in 2026 for all of your events and services you're providing to the city. So this, obviously, if you're here, you were awarded an amount by the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, and that was approved by the Monroe City Council. So this is just going to go over some of those details, some of the contract elements that you will be seeing coming over later today. And then also talking about what we will ask for in your reimbursement request when you're actually trying to get the funding from the City of Monroe. So it should be a very quick presentation. There should be a Q&A function. If you have any questions, you are also always more than welcome to call or email me, and I will be more than happy to answer any questions you have throughout this process. So let's go ahead and get started. So, starting with the tourism services agreement, that is something I will be sending you today. I was hoping to send it yesterday, but our emails went down for a little bit. So, going to get them out to you today so you can start reviewing those over, and we can start going. This is on your left what the tourism services contract kind of cover page will look like. I recommend you read it through all on your own. But the kind of core details I want to go over are the award term, the award amount, the reporting requirements, and the scope of service. The award term is obviously for 2026, so we will reimburse any expenses that occurred between January 1st, 2026 of this year, all the way until December 31st, 2026. If you have any expenses that occurred in 2025 or that will occur in 2027, those are not eligible under this tourism service agreement. So if you're applying for something next year, that will have to be a totally separate application and award that comes out. Only expenses for 2026 will be considered. The award amount, that's going to differ for each of you, and it will explicitly write out, we will not reimburse any expenses over that amount. So even if all of your receipts come back and it ends up going over the amount you were officially awarded by the city council, we will not be able to award over the amount. We will only award up to the amount you were approved for by city council. Reporting requirements, there's kind of three main areas that the contract goes over in terms of reporting requirements, two of which I will go over in more detail in this presentation. The first of which is it is asking you to keep all of the receipts for the expenses you are trying to get reimbursed. That helps us approve your request and also be good stewards of public money. The second of which is a requirement also required by the state that you are keeping track of the amount of attendees, either through direct or indirect accounts who are attending your events. That's something we also have to report back to the state based on what you provide us. And then the third of which is an acknowledgement of public records. As you are probably aware, the City of Monroe is subject to public records requirements. So any of our interactions with your event in terms of this reimbursement are also subject to those same public records requirements. So it's something to be aware of when you're interacting with the city, that everything that you are doing on your end and communicating with us potentially could come out in a public records request. So something to be aware of. Final of which I'll talk more about on the next slide, is the scope of services, and that details what we will be actually reimbursing you for as part of our agreement. Final thing I will mention is all of these contracts must be signed before we will process any reimbursement request. Great. So scope of services, that comes out in Exhibit A. As I mentioned, it will detail the eligible expenses, what we will actually reimburse you for. For the vast majority of you, what this is going to say is it will say recipient shall perform the following tourism services for the city, and most likely that is going to be marketing and promotion, or marketing and operation, excuse me, of insert your event here. And that allows us to do two things. One, it is confirmation by you that you will indeed be putting on that event. And two, it is a confirmation for us that that is the expenses we are reimbursing you as part of this request. The scope of services also details a couple of additional requirements, both of which relating to printed and electronic materials. For all printed and electronic materials that are coming out, you must put a disclosure that it was made possible in part by the assistance from the City of Monroe Hotel Motel Tax Fund. And for electronic promotion specifically, we ask that you put a link to the City of Monroe's website. And that is to allow members of the public who are attending your event to understand where some of that money came from, and then also allows us to better communicate how our lodging tax funding is being used across the city. I understand some of the events that were approved um, started incurring some expenses and some advertising before today's date, starting in January 1st. So I will waive this requirement for any of those that have already started. But from here on out, any printed or electronic materials, I would expect you to have this kind of disclosure statement in there and links to the City of Monroe's website. Next. So that goes over the contract. Once again, I recommend you read it through yourself and send me any questions. It will need to be signed before I will look at any reimbursement requests. So with that, I will go into the reimbursement process. As you are most likely aware through reading through the application, the City of Monroe only distributes lodging tax funds in reimbursement forms, in form of reimbursement. So we created a reimbursement form to make this easier for you, and it consists of a couple of elements that we will request before we allow that money to be distributed back to you to cover your events. First of which, what you are seeing on your screen is a cover page that's just detailing the kind of preliminary information and also a certification that you are requesting money for what we authorized you to request it for and something that is authorized and eligible by state law. We also ask that you fill out a itemized reimbursement request. So that's just detailing kind of the line items for what you are requesting and where that requesting amount is coming from. And then we also require copies of itemized receipts for invoices. So every itemized item you are requesting, we need some sort of receipt or invoice that's detailing that. And then we also need a proof of payment. So I will go into that more on the next slide. Finally, if you're requesting marketing material reimbursements, I do ask that you provide us a sample of that marketing material so that way we can double check to make sure that the disclosure statement funded by the Monroe Lodging Tax Hotel Motel Fund is in those marketing materials, and we can make sure that those marketing materials are good to go. And if you ever need a logo, I should mention from the City of Monroe, feel free to contact me, and I will be more than happy to get that to you. Also, we'll mention, as it is written in the contract, all reimbursement requests are due by December 15th, 2026, unless otherwise agreed to in writing. If you need an extension on this, please let me know. I will just need to make sure that we are able to process that before the end of the year and before our next budgeting cycle. So please just stay in contact with me. You are able to invoice us up to a monthly amount, preferably no more than monthly. And also, I would ask that you submit all of your reimbursement requests no later than 30 days after the final day of your event or festivity. So that way we are not processing requests that happened close to a year ago. I would prefer them to be more current when I'm looking through them. All right. Looking at the reimbursement form, this is the Appendix A. This is just looking at the itemized reimbursement request. I just ask that you list the transaction amount, the transaction date, some of the invoice or receipt numbers, just some identifiable way for me to associate the transaction to whatever invoice you are including as part of your packet. And then obviously the vendor name and a brief description of what that was used for in terms of your event so I can make sure it is related to your scope of service. In terms of proof of payment, we allow quite a few different options to prove that you did indeed pay and process these invoices and receipts. That can be a copy of a clear check, a bank statement, a credit card statement, or any other banking documentation that proves that you actually paid for the receipt or invoice. You are more than welcome to black out any personally identifiable information, social security numbers, credit card numbers, banking account numbers. All I ask is that your organization's name is clearly located on those proofs of payment, and if it is not readily apparent, that you identify or label the charges so I can compare the proof of payment to those itemized receipts and invoices. For most of you, you won't need the whole 19 rows of different items, but if you do, just feel free to add on more sheets onto Appendix A. All right, the third component is a reporting worksheet. As I mentioned, this is required by state law. Um, what we are asking is that you track your overall attendance, the attendance of people who traveled for more than 50 plus miles, the attendance of people who traveled out of state, out of country, the attendance of people who paid for overnight lodging, and the actual amount of paid lodging nights that were created due to your event. This is not something the city is requesting from you to be burdensome. It is required by state law to make sure that we are being good stewards of public money and that our lodging tax funding is going towards events that are improving and increasing tourism attendance, which is the reasoning behind LTAC fund in the first place. So before I distribute your final award amounts, especially if you're requesting multiple amounts, I will need to request this reporting worksheet so we can make sure we are getting the state what they need in terms of their own reporting. Perfect. So I'm going to conclude with talking about a couple of allowable expenses just to make sure we are all on the same page. According to state law, and you probably read this as you were going through your application, there are four allowed uses of lodging tax funds. For most of you, only two of these are really going to apply, and that's going to be A and B, tourism marketing and operations of special events and festivals. Um, so that is mostly what we are going to be focused around. Capital expenditures are only allowed for government entities, and then operations of tourism-related facilities are only for tourism-related facilities and specific towards nonprofit entities. And that had to be pretty clear in your application. So for most of you, like I said, A and B is where we're going to be focusing around. So, eligible expenses, I put a couple of examples here. I think it is good to walk through a couple of things that we will not allow. The first of which is capital expenses. And the RCW or Revised Code of Washington is not entirely clear what they mean by capital expenses. So I always encourage you that if you are unsure if that expense is eligible or might count as a capital expense, that you reach out to us first. Um, Good examples is anything that is tangible and long-term may be a capital expense. So we have to make sure that the expenses that you are using us or that you are charging to us are specific to the event that we detail in your scope of services, and that is not being used for other events because LTAC did not approve those other events. So other examples include we will not fund any award or reimbursements that are related to some other event that's not included in your scope of service. We will not award any amounts that were incurred outside of that award period of 2026. And if you are unable to provide a proof of payment or a receipt, we will also not be able to reimburse that expense. With that said, there are plenty of things we do allow. Brochures, flyers, and digital advertisements, we are more than happy to reimburse as long as you are providing us with a sample in your reimbursement request. Event equipment, space rentals, event vendors, and then even staff expenses, as long as you're providing the proper payroll documentation, we will all reimburse. So that is a kind of overall arc of some of the examples of not allowed expenses and allowed expenses. Once again, I highly encourage you that if you are ever unsure whether something is allowed or not allowed, please reach out to me. It is a lot better for me to clarify before you make the expense rather than for you to ask for the expense and then have me tell you I can't actually pay for that. So yep, just make sure you are keeping me in the loop and we should be good to go. So with that, like I said, it is a very brief presentation. I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. There is a Q&A function. I don't see any questions currently, but you are always more than welcome to contact me at any time. As I mentioned, we will be sending out the contracts for you to look over later today. And once those are signed, we will be ready to start processing reimbursement requests. So thank you all again. I'm going to wait a couple of minutes to see if there are any questions that pop into the chat. Um, but thank you all for attending. If there's nothing else, you are free to go. Make sure you write down my contact information. When you are ready to start processing reimbursements, you can either distribute those to City Hall or send them straight to my email. And always happy to help out. None of these requirements we are putting out in order to burden you. We just want to make sure we are being good stewards of public money and that we are supporting you in putting on your events. So if you ever need support, please feel free to reach out. I am happy to help out in any way that I can. So with that, I will slowly stop talking and thank you all for attending. Great. No questions.